Hello, viewers, and welcome to the second day of Steel Mint Engage 4.0 webinar series. As with previous editions, we are talking to industry experts to get an in-depth view of the market dynamics playing out in the finished steel and raw material space to facilitate decision-making for stakeholders in the steel industry. I'm Madhumita Mukherjee, editor, Steel Mint, and I have with me my colleague Jay Prakash to co-host this webinar with me. JP, can I request you to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thank you, Madhumita ma'am. So it will be I'm Jayaprakash Sahu. I'm looking after scrap and recycling market. It is a very interesting session where we will be able to hear our eminent speaker from Pakistan who will let us know how they are tackling the ongoing uncertainties. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, JP. I also want to thank the Indian Steel Association for supporting Steel Mint in this webinar series. And we also want to remind our viewers to actively participate in the webinar by sending in their queries, which we will take up towards the end of the session. Now, to come back to our topic, which JP already gave a hint of, our topic for discussion today is a very interesting one. It concerns our neighbor Pakistan, and I'm sure many of our viewers will be very keen to know in greater detail the on-ground steel scenario there. The topic is navigating uncertainties, analyzing the impact of currency, demand, and raw material factors on Pakistan's steel market. Low growth, high inflation, depleting foreign reserves, falling investments, huge debt obligations, not to speak of the political instability, have been plaguing Pakistan's economy for the past few years. But currently, the entire business scenario is slowing down owing to an all-time high interest rate of 21% and a lack of financing avenues for ferrous scrap buyers and mills. As a result, they are unable to conduct sustainable business. With the government's tight monetary policy in place, buyers have largely disappeared. As per data from the State Bank of Pakistan released in April, imports of steel and scrap have fallen by over 50% this fiscal year, which is computed from July to June. This sharp decline in consumption of steel is also visible from the almost 12% year-on-year decline in the large-scale manufacturing sector in February. Against this backdrop, we have with us Mr. Arshak of Mughal Steel, which is the largest steel producer in Pakistan. Mr. Aram is the manager, supply chain and R&D, Mughal Steel, and he will throw further light on the situation prevailing in Pakistan at present, with a special focus on the ferrous scrap and steel segments. I request Mr. Aram to take over. Over to you, Mr. Aram.
Thank you so much. So first of all, I would like to apologize on behalf of the original speaker, Mr. Fahad Javed, who unfortunately could not be with us because he had to leave all of a sudden due to a family emergency. But I rest assured you should not be worried because I'll be filling his shoes, and I'll be looking forward to share my insight with our audience. So let's start with the first concern that everyone has. What can we say about the current economic situation of Pakistan? Now, it's no surprise, Pakistan's economy has weakened as we look at Q1 2023 figures. And it's all due to last year's devastating floods, which cost around $40 billion in damages. So the destruction of crops, coupled with the rising domestic energy prices due to the Russia-Ukraine war, worsened Pakistan's already ballooning inflation, which rose to a 50-year high of 36.4% in April 2023. So the aftermath of last year's floods saw increased spending on imports. However, the resulting dip in productivity per capita contributed to Pakistan's balance of payment crisis. So unfortunately, Pakistan was unable to earn enough foreign exchange to fund their much needed imports. So at the earlier stage, international reserves had drained to the point of causing a foreign exchange crisis. In Q1, Pakistan's foreign reserves were hovering around $4 billion, which are insufficient to finance even a month of the country's import bills. Now, massive external debt obligations had left the country at the brink of default risk. The whole situation was very tricky, and Pakistan was on thin ice, resting barely on the $6.5 billion IMF program, which had to be worked out between Pakistan and the international lender. And to add to that, we were also witnessing political unrest. So what is Pakistan's economic growth contingent upon? The way I see it, we can shortlist three major factors. Firstly, inflation. Now, cooling domestic demand should ease inflation. However, with the added pressure of removal of currency controls and fuel subsidies, that should keep inflation above its 10-year average of 8%. So we should not be that much hopeful in terms of inflation. Number two, climate change. The Global Climate Risk Index ranks Pakistan among the 10 most vulnerable nations. And every year, climate-induced extreme weather has led to thousands of fatalities and colossal losses in agriculture, infrastructure, and economy. And lastly, Pakistan's dependence on international support. IMF's continued support to Pakistan is based solely on Pakistan's willingness to adapt to difficult reform choices. Furthermore, we're also relying on bailouts from our foreign partners. So if Pakistan, with a growing population of plus 230 million people, is unable to meet external debt obligations, this will trigger sovereign default. It will worsen civil unrest, and it will create more political turmoil.
Yeah. Mr. Ram, just to interrupt you, can you please share your PPT also? So it will be
Sure. Sure.
For our viewers.
So let's move on to the next topic. Let's tell a little bit about the steel market overview and performance. So as Ms. Madhumita also shared a little bit about that, ferrous scrap import. Now, it contributes to accounts for only 1% of Pakistan's total imports, or 26% of Pakistan's metal imports, and both have decreased down from 3% and 35% respectively. Now, if you take a look at last year's scrap import, they were just 3.4 million tons, which is a 12% decrease over 2021. And if you look at this quarter 1, 2023, we just imported 565,000 tons, which is a 20% decrease over the previous quarter and a 52% decrease over the same quarter previous year. Now, we talk about the steel sector. As we mentioned many times, it's largely competitive but fragmented. Now, we have seen the emergence of several new steel production units as a result of several private investments and diversification initiatives of many big groups in other unrelated industries like textile and sugar. So all in all, we can say that the steel industry composes over 600 smaller and bigger mills. It is majorly driven by private organizations, and the top 20 players contributes to 80% of the total market revenue, which is $800 million. Now, if we talk about the steel production capacity, as the industry is fragmented, it is very difficult to quote a precise figure, and different sources use their own proxies to estimate the steel production capacity. But based on our best estimate, it is estimated at 7 to 8 million tons, of which long products are 5 to 6 million tons and flat products are 2 million tons. Now, if we take into account World Steel Association, they have reported that Pakistan's steel production is estimated at 5.3 million tons in 2021. This is just 0.18% of the world steel production. We are ranked 39th among 50 countries. If we compare to Pakistan's peak contribution, that was 0.29% back in 2017, when we were seeing good days. So if we talk about steel products demand, average domestic demand for the past 5 years have been estimated at 7 million tons on average. Today, we can say that it is estimated at 13.5 million tons. Per capita consumption was recently reported at 59 kilos in 2021. This is a 5% decrease over Pakistan's peak consumption of 62 kilos back again in 2017, which was a good year for Pakistan. Now, if we talk about the demand drivers, now previously, Pakistan's steel demand had been greatly influenced by the boom in transportation, automotive, and appliances sectors. We were facing increasing industrialization and expansions of current steel mills, expansion of capacities, and most importantly, we have seen an increase in housing projects and infrastructure projects, both from the government and CPEC as well. However, all said and done, despite struggling economy, we still believe that demand is expected to sustain, and that is all due to the socio-cultural factors of Pakistan that we have witnessed for the past 50 or 60 years. Despite all these struggling conditions, we have still seen that banks have materialized all their housing loans, no matter what stage they were in, either planning or implementation. Pakistan is still experiencing persisting rapid urbanization, almost 3%, where more and more people are selling their farmlands and moving to the metropolitan cities by constructing or buying new houses. We are seeing a shift from joint family system, one house, to nuclear family, multiple houses. And Pakistan has a very, very young population. Almost 36% of the population is aged 0 to 14. And as they're evolving into young married adults, they're not, if not they're constructing a new room, they're constructing new houses. So all of this is contributing to more and more construction projects and infrastructure development. And last but not the least, upcoming elections in Q4 of 2023 is also going to see more construction projects, because historically the winning political parties have always invested in construction and infrastructure, which sends a positive signals to the Pakistan population. And most importantly, the resuming of CPEC with the announcement of $65 billion railway project from China to Gwadar and a $4.5 billion oil refinery project. So we are seeing that despite Pakistan's struggling economy, we do expect that demand will continue to sustain. But when we talk about the supply side, we do see that there is a persistent demand-supply gap. Now, despite expansion of domestic production, Pakistan's steel imports have still increased. We still have to rely on Pakistan steel imports. And the major flaw is the underutilization of the steel industry, which is due to many factors, but the major ones that I can point out are gas shortages and power outages, exorbitant interest rates, which drives up the borrowing costs, and weak financial institutions. And as we all know, the political turmoil as well. So if we look at the supply drivers, now, yes, in Q1 2023, supply chain was affected by the currency devaluation, the rising costs of utilities, and the rising raw material prices due to the dollar impact. Yet, we believe that the impact is short-term and supply chain will normalize pretty soon, because historically we have seen that rising prices have never impacted steel demand. Pakistan market has a high capacity for price absorption. Prices have increased from about 90% over the past 5 years, but it has never ever affected our demand. And the rising cost of production only affected small players. Yes, factories did shut down because of compounding overhead losses, but the larger players swooped in and absorbed their market share. So overall, even though the aggregate market share did decrease, but it didn't affect the larger players so much that are contributing 80% to the market. And rising prices have never stopped or delayed construction projects, because delaying construction projects sends a negative signal, and it also affects people on a socio-cultural perspective. So that's why no matter what the conditions are, they will still try to arrange funds to ensure that the construction projects are never delayed, which is true for Pakistan. Now, let's talk about the final deliverable, which is the raw material supply constraints. Yes, everyone is asking the question that how will Pakistan manage its raw material supply? Now, yes, previously, last year, the supply chain constraints were totally different. First and foremost, container shortage due to China's entry into ferrous scrap market. Less containers were available coming from abroad to Pakistan. So that's the main shortage we faced last year. And scrap shortage overall due to the Russia-Ukraine war, when Russia was out of the ferrous scrap market and the available suppliers shrunk for Pakistan. However, recently, in present times, internal constraints are affecting our industry. And these include not only shrinking credit limits. So if we have no LCs, we cannot import raw material, and shortage of foreign reserves. If we have no dollars, we cannot retire the shipping documents for the consignments that are stuck at port. So just to recap, early 2023, yes, the steel industry, along with all other industries in Pakistan, were on the brink of collapse. Steel mills had already been operating on 30% capacity when we faced these issues. State Bank at that time raised interest rates to record levels, over 20% borrowing costs. The government further raised energy prices. They raised general sales tax. The banks did not have dollars for the retirement of incoming consignments. So we were also incurring detention and damage charges on our containers stuck at port. And most importantly, we did not have dollars to open LCs for new raw material because the limited foreign reserves were being allocated to only limited industries, essential items like food, pharmaceutical imports. Steel was not one of them, unfortunately, in early 2023. However, if we talk about the future is bright. Yeah. Steel shortage and rising costs did contribute to a hike in steel prices. But like I said, Pakistan has a high capacity for price absorption. All the additional costs were passed on to the customer and demand was not affected as much. So we are still selling. Most importantly, we have always had government support to ensure that domestic steel products have always remained competitive against imported steel products by virtue of regulatory duties and also anti-dumping duties on certain countries. So our domestic steel has always remained competitive. Finally, the increased pressure on working capital due to these rising costs. Now, they did cause overheads and losses for the smaller players. Factories did shut down. Jobs were at risk. And not just the steel industry, 30 to 40 allied industries that are closely linked to the steel sector, like paint, cement. Like if we do not have steel, we cannot use paint, we cannot use cement on those houses. They were also at risk. And the potential risk that we were seeing was an aggregate annual economic activity of almost $2,000 million was at risk. Fortunately, the government came to their senses. They resumed credit lines for the ferrous scrap import, and they finally understood that steel is an essential item for a developing country. So now we are back on the right track, and we are pretty hopeful that the supply chain will normalize pretty soon. That's all from my side.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ram, for your insightful presentation. First of all, I was also curious to know how like most energy import dependent countries, Pakistan is also struggling with high inflation and also with high interest rate.
Yeah.
How this has impacted the steel demand domestically?
No, they have impacted steel demand. Now, if we talk about the larger players, as you said, the rising energy prices are affecting the steel industry. Players are trying to invest in power generation. You know, they're installing solar power plants, they're installing hybrid power plants. So rising energy prices is something that is being already catered to by the larger players. And the domestic scrap production, it has always been not as much to support the complete steel production. Like in my estimate, domestic scrap is just 1.5 to 1.1 million tons, which is not able to sustain the whole production. So import is a necessity. It is a necessity. So we cannot stop importing. And that's why the government resumed import for the steel sector pretty soon. Yeah, they did do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Ram. Another question, I will just request you to, can you please stop the screen sharing so that
sure,
we can move to gallery view. My another question was, how is the capacity utilization in steel in Pakistan? Right now the demand is very low. Also, there are challenges for the raw materials.
Yeah.
So on every uncertainties, how steel mills are operating right now, what is the capacity utilizations right now? And what do you think how long this may sustain? Yeah.
Now, the underutilization of steel industry in Pakistan, it's something that has been plaguing Pakistan for the past many years. Like I said, Pakistan had been operating at 30% capacity for many, many years due to the reasons that I mentioned, you know, gas outages, power outages, lack of R&D, and all those factors that I previously mentioned. Now, if we talk about per capita consumption, Pakistan's population is increasing at 1.8%. So on the population side, we are increasing, and on the demand side, it's not increasing as much. So we cannot say anything about per capita consumption right now. We cannot quote what the per capita consumption would be right now because, as I said, figures are not documented properly. However, like I said, that demand will keep on sustaining. Now, it's just a small time hiccup, right? Like I said, all of these issues that have caused scrap imports to decrease, they were due to certain factors, external constraints last year, internal constraints this quarter. However, like I said, these constraints are temporary, these are short-lived, these are internal, so hence we can control them. External constraints we could not control, internal we can. So the government is doing all in its power to rectify all the issues that the steel industry had been facing in quarter one. They're introducing new policies, they're introducing new introducing new quotas for the steel industry so that their scrap import is not affected.
Mr. Aram, I have a couple of questions for you. The
Yes.
first one is on the Pakistan rupee. The Pakistani rupee PKR is
Yes.
almost at an all-time low.
Yes,
So,
yes.
so does it build a case for exports of ferrous scrap, non-ferrous or related products from Pakistan?
Well, if you talk about export, yes, export industry of Pakistan has been quite strong over the past couple of years, but every year these devastating floods do put a hiccup on our exports. Like I said, the balance of payment crisis is not just due to the push of spending on imports due to the devastation, but also because our exports are also affected. We cannot export agricultural products. We cannot export fruits. We cannot export agricultural products because of this destruction. So yes, it is a hit that we face every year. However, as we have seen over the past 3 years, the metal sector has been going up so far as exports are concerned. Metal is ranked number 5th right now so far as the total exports of Pakistan are concerned. 3 years back, they were not even top 10, right? So we are slowly moving towards a position where we can say that our exports will be able to sustain our imports, right? We might not be able to balance it right now this year, perhaps in 5 years, perhaps in 3 years. So it's still an ongoing process. It's still something that we are working on. At least we can say that we have a plan, and as long as we have a plan, we can hope for the best.
So which geographies did you all, I mean, in the past, you said that you did export. So which were the geographies generally that you all exported steel, ferrous and non-ferrous?
Non-ferrous is mostly exported to China. Steel exports not that much. Non-ferrous exports to China are the most contributing factor to Pakistan's export. Yep.
Okay. And my next question: many developed countries are pitching to restrict exports of scrap. I mean, we all know that most countries are developing, a very protectionist stance. So, how can this affect Pakistan steel mills, which are primarily based on imported scrap? Also, can the ship recycling sector in Pakistan provide some level of support to this overall scrap supply scenario?
Now, when we talk about the steel industry, like I said, over 600 bigger and smaller mills. Yes, the steel breaking industry has contributed to the heavy melting scrap, remeltable scrap, to the smaller players. But so far as the larger players are concerned, as we all know that the quality that the ship breaking provides is not as much as other scrap variants. So larger players will always consider it a small portion of their total consumption, whereas shredded steel or bundles would be the most dominant raw material in their production. But so far as the plus 500 smaller mills are concerned, they will always rely on those ship breaking scrap on HMS because it's cheaper and because quality control might not be as strong as a factor for the smaller mills as compared to the larger players. So that will remain a strong, not a strong, but a component of Pakistan's import, not so much for the larger players, but totally for the smaller players, right? And the first question that you asked, that other developing countries are restricting their export of scrap. Pakistan does not export scrap. We export semi-finished to finished non-ferrous products.
No, since other countries are adopting a very protectionist stance, my question is, will that impact Pakistan's imports of scrap in any way? I mean, will supply decrease?
Okay. I got it. Okay. So developing countries. If we talk about Pakistan import, UK, Europe is the major exporting country for Pakistan, followed by UAE, and then followed by USA, and then followed by South Africa, Australia. So those developing countries might not be that much of a hit to Pakistan's scrap import, because our major import of raw material comes from UK and Europe.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question on the same which we are discussing right now. I think if there is any availability issue for ferrous scrap, so these mills are also looking after any alternative like DRI. Means there are very few mills currently which are using DRI as an alternative, but I think most of the mills are still reliant on the shredded scrap.
Yeah, you're right. DRI has been a subject of interest for many steel mills. They have tried their hand at consuming DRI, but there have always been two factors that have sort of been a pushing factor. The first is getting a steady supply of DRI, getting a supply that's constant, not just monthly, not just seasonal. And the second thing is how the local production units, how the steel units can understand the recipe of including DRI into their scrap production. So that's always been an issue. Not every steel mill is savvy enough to know how to combine DRI into their total scrap mix.
Yeah, just to address this,
there
I
are a few
think
players who are, but the general answer is that not many, because we are plus 600 steel mills. So only the top players might have the technical know-how, they might have the initiative, they might have the drive or the vision to include it as a part of their recipe, but not many steel players.
Yeah, I just have an announcement just to tackle this issue. Means since they are not aware about the recipe and the technology, we are organizing one session tomorrow. So Mr. Vivek will be there from Godavari Power and Ispat Limited. He has pioneered the DRI steel making, and he has established many projects in SPL and also in the Godavari, and they are running their plant with 100% DRI. So that may be one insight session which our audience can join. That is tomorrow, the second session in the same time. Let's take one question from our audience side also. So our audience is asking, means what percentage of Pakistan steel imports is from China? Means do you
very few.
Yeah, do you also buy any steel from Indian mills?
Very few.
Very few. Yeah.
Like
Okay.
if I would order them on a ranked basis, it would be UK, Europe first, then UAE, then USA, and then South Africa, Australia, and other countries. Yeah. So very minimal.
And there is also another question, means what percentage of steel is consumed by Pakistan in construction and infrastructure sector? So do you have any idea, means what may be the proportion in construction?
Yeah, sure. Like I said, 7 million tons. So 5 million tons, if we say that 7 million tons is the capacity, 5 million goes to long rolled products and 2 million goes to flat rolled products. So we can use that as a proportion, right? 5 million will go to the construction side, 2 million will go to the other sector like automotive, appliances, and other industries.
Yeah. There is also another
question. Ratio, yeah, just as a proportion.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So there is also another question, means since Pakistan is majorly importing scrap as a raw material to make steel, so is there any import tax on import of scrap, or is it nil duty?
No, it's not nil duty. It's not at all. Over the past 5 years, yes, the government has introduced exemptions on custom duties. They have gradually decreased, but still not zero. Yeah.
Okay.
Like if we talk about scrap, there are many different forms of scrap, ferrous, non-ferrous. So on ferrous, there are still duties. Yeah.
Oh, great. So I think you may be also aware about one development which happened recently, that Indian customers stopped UAE origin cargoes here in India, in Indian ports.
Okay.
So is there any impact on Pakistan? Means do you also see any impact, means this cargo moving to Pakistan or anything else?
I don't think, like previous year we did face 2 years in the past 1 to 2 years we did face an issue when UAE had temporarily stopped the export of scrap. That was just a minor hiccup, but soon all of those problems were circumvented because UAE players are interested in Pakistan as a main source of their import. So that was the only issue we faced last couple of years. But right now we don't see any hiccup right now.
I think there is just a small question from our audience side, means on the DRI. Is Mughal Steel currently using DRI as a raw material?
No.
Oh, so you are 100% scrap based.
Yep.
Great. Is there any ratio between shredded HMS or other form of scraps?
It keeps on varying. Because like there were times when we were using shredded 70%, HMS 30%, but as time progresses, and it's not something that we say it's a fixed recipe. It depends on various factors: availability, cost, and other. It depends on the blend, on the mix. So we cannot say it's a definite ratio. Sometimes we have also used 50-50. Sometimes we also use 20-80. So it keeps on changing based on the current scenario at hand. There's no fixed rule.
Okay. Are you also looking after HBI, hot briquette iron?
Or no, not HBI, hot briquette iron.
Okay. Okay, over to you, Madhumita ma'am. I think I have taken a lot of questions.
No, not a problem at all. Mr. Aram, can you walk us through the power situation in Pakistan and to what extent is that impacting steel production? I mean, no, we know it's very bad, but still we would like to hear from you, the on-ground scenario, what it is like.
So yeah, the Pakistan economy, like I said,
The power situation in particular.
sorry?
The power situation, power
Power
availability.
situation. Okay, the power situation. The power situation, yes, it has been a recurring issue, but like I said, raising energy prices, raising surcharge, all of these costs are passed on to the consumer. So it has never been an issue for us steel suppliers because, like I said, Pakistan has a high capacity for price absorption. If we do increase price, it is for a genuine reason, and they do absorb the price. And like I said, other players are also taking initiatives to support their energy to support their energy generation. They're installing solar plants, they're installing hybrid power plants. So people are doing the best that they can to salvage the situation. But even in the face of the rising energy prices in the past many months, these costs have always been passed on to the consumer, and the consumers still purchase our steel. Yeah.
JP, you want to ask some more questions?
Yeah, I think I have only one question more. I think I was interested about the capacity expansion of steel mills in Pakistan. It's very certain that the pace may have slowed down. Means I wanted to
Yeah,
know
has.
your outlook. Means what is happening right now, and especially
Well,
in which
now,
direction? Means we are moving towards basic oxygen furnace route, or we are moving towards only induction furnace and EF only.
induction furnace. Induction
Yeah.
furnace only. Right now, yes, induction furnace, but as I said, currently expansion would not be the main priority for any steel mill right now. The main focus right now is sustenance. We're trying to sustain our supply chain. We're trying to sustain our supply and demand, and then we'll focus on expansion perhaps next year. The whole steel industry as a whole. Yeah.
Okay. And in light of the prevailing dollar-related challenges affecting LC operations, what alternative means exist for Pakistani mills to effectively resolve transaction settlements?
Well, I think that's the only because many different schemes and initiatives have come up. Like barter schemes, export against import, but there's never been a right mix where we can be a part of those schemes. Barter anything. Steel scrap import does remain the only way we can get scrap to sustain our production. As I mentioned, local scrap production is not sufficient. It's just 1.1 to 1.5 million tons. Compare that to 3.3 million tons of scrap import, and compare that to 5 million tons of production that we have to do. So we do have to rely on scrap import. That's the unfortunate reality. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a question from one of the attendees on power again. What is the cost of power after setting up solar and hybrid power plants?
I wouldn't know the exact figure, and I'm not at liberty to share those figures. But yes, those players who are doing it might be able to tell about it much better on a different platform. Yeah.
Yeah. So all fine, sir. I think we should conclude this session. Madhumita ma'am, what do you?
Yeah, we've had a very exhaustive session with Mr. Aram. He's given us a very good lowdown on the current scenario in Pakistan, and I'm sure our audience really enjoyed learning from him as much as we did. That's all we can accommodate in this session. And in case you need to know more from Mr. Aram, do write to us separately and we will get these questions answered. A very warm thank you to Mr. Aram for sharing his valuable time with us. And it was a pleasure having you on the session.
The pleasure was all mine.
Thank you to Jayaprakash Sahu for co-moderating the session with me. A big thank you again to the Indian Steel Association for its support. I'm Madhumita Mukherjee, editor Steel Mint, signing out of this webinar. Bye, everyone.